Welcome, everybody, to the Stainless Steel World podcast. Today, we're speaking with Helen Harvey, who's Regional Sales Director for the UK and Ireland. And we have Barinder Ghai, who is the Director of Technical Marketing and New Business Development for the EMEA region. So welcome. Now, today we're going to be talking about life cycle assessment, or LCA, which is a really important aspect of stainless steel production in the world we live in today. LCA is an important tool that end users and manufacturers are really focused on at the moment. So, Helen, I'd like to throw the first question to you, if I may. What does LCA stand for in the context of Alleima?
Yes, Joanne, thank you for that. So here at Alleima, life cycle assessment, it's a method we use to evaluate environmental impact of a product throughout its entire life cycle, from the raw material extraction that we do as the article starts in some beacon through to the finished product. We call this cradle to gate. We, in turn, provide full transparency and traceable data on the carbon emissions to provide the LCA data. Our claims are trustworthy and data-driven, and all received and reviewed by LCA independent experts, for example, the Swedish Environmental Research Institute, to make sure our data is trustworthy and open.
Okay, now, Helen, in your answer, you mentioned a term, cradle to gate. Barinder, I'd like to turn to you and say, what does cradle to gate actually mean in terms of stainless steel production?
Hello, Joanne. Thanks again for this opportunity. Yeah, so Helen already mentioned and touched upon cradle to gate. So basically, cradle to gate is our journey when we talk about stainless steel processing. So starting from the raw material extraction to the final product. Now, this cradle to gate is basically, you might have heard of different scopes within sustainability and LCA process. It starts with scope 3 because we source our you can say raw material, but mainly it's recycled scrap, what we put to start our steel. And then we make sure that this scrap, or even if we buy, say, ore from outside, they are, as Helen already mentioned, they are certified by verified suppliers, so that we make sure that whatever we are processing, it get processed with the lowest carbon footprint. And then there are a lot of different factors which comes into account, like we have fossil-free energy, which will be discussed during the course of this podcast. But I think I will stop here now for cradle to gate, but hope it gives you some idea. And then I'll explain again scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 when we move further on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Barinder. Now, if we're talking about the advantages of LCA, what are the key advantages at Alleima for this concept?
Well, as Barinder mentioned, Joanne, not only do we use our recycled scrap, but we also use an electric arc furnace in the processing of the materials and a bottle-free fuel used at our site in Stavinikin to manufacture the goods. So not only are we using good quality verified scrap, we're using the processing of electricity, fossil-free fuels, and an electric arc furnace. This makes our data quantifiable. So we can measure the CO2 emissions, we can measure the emissions and the energy used to produce each one of our individual products. And that makes us transparent and gives us credible sustainability reporting to our customers, which they in turn can use for their reporting and their scope 3, as Barinder mentioned earlier.
Okay, Barinder, did you want to comment on the key advantages at all?
Yeah, means we definitely, Helen has mentioned a lot of advantages, but I think it's also kind of synergy when we talk about advantages. So working closely, say, with our partners, I can give you an example. So without naming anyone, so if someone gets a steel from Alleima, which is almost zero, you can say, in the carbon footprint. So we become scope 3 for that company. For example, heat exchanger manufacturer. And I think if they are also certified, as you might have heard of EcoVadis, so we are also EcoVadis Gold. So if we are EcoVadis Gold and our fabricator is also EcoVadis Gold, and if there is an end user anywhere in the world, so I think this is the biggest advantage what they will get. They will get not only the steel, but also an equipment which is very low in carbon footprint, and that will tick the box for their scope 3. So I think this is just an example what Helen said to verify what and how we do it.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Now, this is something, the whole issue of sustainability, life cycle cost assessment, this is a hot topic for stainless steel manufacturers. We know that Alleima is sort of leading the way in this, or one of the leaders anyway. But how are you managing to differentiate yourself on the carbon footprint journey as such in the industry?
I believe this is a very valid question. How we differentiate, because this is something which we do not only in the carbon footprint journey, but also starting from our product form. So, and just to mention, Alleima is into this not from now, since 1929. If you see, we always buy, our raw material, which are very less in inclusion. So that journey started right from that stage. And we try to promote also some of the grades which are low in nickel contents, because higher the nickel content, higher the carbon emission is. If you take an example of, say, our recent innovation, Cenicro 35, what we did recently, and probably you might have heard in different conferences. So this is one of the grade which replaces a very high nickel alloy. And then we call that performance versus sustainability. So it not only reduces the cost commercially when you are talking about replacing this with high nickel alloys, but as I mentioned now, the more nickel, the more carbon emissions. And this alloy has got comparatively very less nickel. So when you compare this material grade with high nickel alloys, you are talking about 20 to 25% reduction in carbon emission. So this is one example how we differentiate, ourselves. And then Helen also mentioned the source of electricity is fossil free for us. When you talk about the steel melting, so you have either blast furnace or you have electric arc furnace, and our process is electric arc, and then again electricity generated from 100% renewable sources. So these are some of the steps, which we have initiated and which are towards 2030, 2050 decarbonization journey. I can give you another example. So within our works now, we used to have a lot of forklifts which were running on diesel or petrol. But now what we have done is we have changed that fuel to HVO 100. Now, as you know, hydrotreated vegetable oil. This is something which is very pure form of oil with very less carbon footprints. So these are some of the small steps which we are taking within our organization. And of course, this will lead to a product which will be very low intensity carbon product and which will be supplied to our customer. Hope this gives you a little bit of more information on how we differentiate with our customers.
Yeah, that's really interesting that it's happening in so many ways. Helen, was there something that you wanted to add on this topic?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Barinder's already said, I mean, we're not just claiming we've got green products, we're providing the data to prove it. We get the third-party verifications and we publish the carbon data rather than actual estimates. We actually produce the actual carbon data that is emitted for each product that we produce in Sambeacon. So it's about open communication and transparency with our customers. They can trust the information they get from us rather than estimates.
Right, because your trust and transparency is so important in this industry, especially when you're talking about something like LCA, which is for some people a little bit of a vague concept still.
Exactly. You need to be able to trust your supplier with the information they give it to you. And we have the data-driven analysis that we can provide that to our customers. We provide data-driven analysis and data-driven information for our customers to allow the transparency and trustworthiness.
Perfect. So continuing with you, Helen, I want to ask you, how does Alleima's approach help at the customer level, which is the distributors and suppliers, and also at the end user level?
Yeah, so not only have we got the information that we've already discussed, the cradle to gate and the efficiencies within that, we've also got the Alleima Code of Conduct, which we live by. We ask our suppliers to sign up to as well, so to prove they're on the same journey as ourselves. We've got the EcoVadis Gold status, which Barinder mentioned earlier, and that is a huge achievement for us in this industry, a typically dirty industry. To achieve gold is absolutely amazing for us, and we're really, really proud of it. And we hope our customers can understand the journey that we've taken to achieve that level, and not only achieve it, keep it. That's the most important part. Obviously, we're working a lot with transport, make sure we don't waste that transport. And also all our resources, inflows and outflows, are all constantly monitored. So this gives benefits for our customers when they're talking about the products they use and the products to their end users, if they're distributors, are also within a completed end user situation. So it impacts their scope 3 and their products that they're delivering on to site and to further customers as well. And we also are able to give the CO2 emissions per product on each certificate. So they can see that when they're buying the material and putting it into a process as well, how many CO2 emissions each product has emitted. So yeah, the benefits for our customers we try and be transparent. We try and lower their carbon emissions to make them more efficient and sustainable in the products they produce as well. And we also have a buyback program, which I think Barinder can elaborate on, being part of it.
Yeah, sure. So, Helen, you touched upon this buyback program. So I'll start with the 3R principle. When we talk about now waste reduction and sustainability, so we very much believe in this 3R, which is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now let's take this context back to Alleima. So of course we manufacture these tubes with very low carbon footprints. These tubes then travel to fabricator, to make a heat exchanger, for example, or any other application. And then what we are doing with this buyback program, once this heat exchanger has completed its life, say whether it is 20 years or 25 years, we are offering our customers rather to send that exchanges back to us rather than scrapping them on site or selling them to some scrap dealer. Why? Because then this connects back to our main fundamentals of reusing the scrap. So we can then scrap and then we can use this again, we can remelt it, and then we can follow the same principle of from cradle to grade. So I think this is something which we are now pursuing and we are sharing with a lot of our customers, and we have seen some big interest. So I think this is all about this buyback program. And probably we might also then provide some incentives, for our partners who work together with us. So these are very initial phases, but we very much believe in this buyback scheme. And we are taking this forward with a lot of end users and fabricators.
Okay, that's clear. Now, I want to touch, Barinder, on one more thing with you. Helen mentioned that there's a customer code of conduct. What is that, and how are you helping customers to operate in more environmentally sustainable ways that are in line with Alleima's philosophy?
Yeah, sure. So let me then give you a bigger picture. So what we have done, say, within Alleima, we, of course, were very proactive when we knew that this carbon footprint journey is coming. So we focused on 6 major segments, within Alleima. So basically, one of them is like biofuels. So I started taking care and leading biofuels industry. Now, this biofuels goes back to the same fundamental of changing the feedstock, say, from fossil to renewable fuel. So that's where we started this journey, and the example which we already have now with Preem Refinery, for example, in Sweden, wherein there was the material being discussed was a very high alloys material, which was nickel alloy, but then based on all the testings and supports we can provide, so then the customer was convinced and we supplied the exchanger with Sanicro 35. Now, if you look at the carbon footprints they have by using this, is enormous. I cannot give you a number now, but there is a massive saving, and that will help also carbon footprint on the side. So I think these are the kind of core fundamentals which we are following. The similar thing is for, say, other areas. We talk about carbon capture and storage. We talk about hydrogen. So we are working with the whole industry where we can supply material which is very low in carbon footprints, and that can help any of this industry in a way that we can become the scope 3 for them, so that then they don't have to juggle much, and then they know the source of material which they are using is already very low in carbon footprint, and they can then plan their scope 1 and scope 2, which is in their in-house. So basically it could be their transportation or it could be their own source of electricity. But I think this journey then helps a lot, taking the whole value chain within Alleima.
Just to reiterate, Barinder's point, which is really, really well made, actually, seeing it from the production to the end users, as you mentioned, but I think from Alleima's point of view, we're not just claiming we've got green products, we're providing the data to prove we have.
Right. So again, that comes back to trust and transparency, and if people know exactly what they're getting from you, they can prove it and they can take it into their carbon reduction programs as well.
Yeah, and maybe I can add something, Joanne. So it's not an easy journey. You imagine how many products we have. If you talk about stainless steel, maybe we are talking more than 500, 600 alloys and the grades and the materials. So imagine now taking one particular material grade into consideration, and we have to individually, classify every single material grade, which can tick box the LCA journey, and it's not straightforward. It takes a long time. So I think this is something which takes a lot of initiative, a lot of proactive approach, but also a lot of efforts. And this is what we have started the journey, and we will be there soon. But just to make everyone aware that this is the journey which probably everyone has to initiate, whether they are into process side or in the material side. But that will be a collective effort. So we alone cannot reduce carbon footprint. It has to be a collective effort. It has to be supplier, it has to be end user, it has to be fabricator. Then only we will be ultimately, if just take an example, if we produce a very low impact carbon footprint product and we transport it long distance with a very high polluted vehicle, everything is gone. So there are a lot of catch in this one. So we have to understand. So I think that's where we have to be very careful that even if we produce the right product, the transportation which takes it and the company who receives it. So this is a very complicated process, but I think slowly, as by experience, we will also resolve this issue.
Fantastic. Barinder, can you tell me a little bit about the science-based targets that Alleima is following in this journey?
Sure. I believe Alleima is committed to Science-Based Target Initiative, which is SBTI. And we have committed to set the targets with the science-based target consistent with the Paris Agreement. And this is again 2030, 2050. Commitment is a natural step in our commercial strategy where sustainability is an integral part of it. And the main contribution to sustainability is through our product offering, enabling the transition towards renewable energy sources, electrification of industry, innovation, say, in the medical sector and more, but also very actively, we seek to minimize the impact on the environment via our operations. So I think this is in very brief, I can explain science-based targets. And this is again a big exercise. And we have a specialized team who are initiating this with the governing bodies. But I think this is something which is very important for Alleima moving forward.
Thank you both for doing it. It was really, really wonderful, very interesting. We'll be in touch.